This wouldn't end until he and I met face to face, and we both knew it. He figured to be on the run back to Asia if Snow White was right, and that meant a flight out of Honolulu. By dawn, the police had sent copies of the blow-up to all the airlines, but it was so blurred, it would take a miracle to recognize him.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And in this episode, folks, we're going to dive into some real discovery issues in the Idaho 4 case that I just realized existed. And I don't know if the Cobberger defense team even realizes this avenue of discovery exists, but I assure you they will after this video. And the reason that I think this is going to be very important is because we just got a new ruling from the judge, and it was the one that I'd been waiting on, one of the most important ones in this case. And it is a ruling that really affects the trial. Because as the defense has stated over and over, and we've done many videos, that once you get into the trial, the jury that is seated to hear that trial is very important. And there is a certain type of classification that is very hindering to truth and justice in this trial, and for putting people on that jury that can keep an open mind. And that is the fact that a death penalty certified jury is typically comprised of people that are more likely to side with the state, keep a closed mind during the process, and convict during the guilt phase, regardless of the evidence. Many studies have been done to prove that, and the defense team has brought that up over and over in court. So the best motion I thought that they had was the motion to preclude the death penalty due to disclosure violations, because that was one that had recent precedent in Idaho, and the state had obviously not complied with discovery during this case in the proper way. Yet we got the ruling in from the judge, and I'll be going over that in video number 2 today. And it would seem like that would have been the last avenue for the defense to try to remove the death penalty, and that's the real reason they wanted it removed. See, the defense knows or prays that they will never get to the stage where the jury is deciding on punishment. However, putting the right people in that jury can greatly impact whether they get to that stage or not. They knew it. They've been saying it. We all know it. So for the judge to rule against that particular motion, number one, I believe almost guarantees a appeal that will produce a new trial. But who wants to do this stuff twice? I know I don't. So making sure that every stone is overturned between now and the trial to make sure that the proper jury is seated, I feel like is very important. And luckily enough for us, the defense is now going to have a little bit of help from a person that you would have never thought they would have had a little bit of help from. And that was the father of one of the victims in this case, Mr. G himself. I reported yesterday on an interview that he did with Banfield. Well, after that interview, apparently he took those Clark Kent glasses off and sat down and did a very long interview on Ashley Banfield's YouTube channel. And in this interview, he was a little bit more open about things than he was in that interview on the national channel. And in doing so, he let the cat out of the bag a couple of times. And we're going to focus on one specific time in this one because it's going to be very important to the defense team, especially when they see this video. Because we all know that in the beginning of this case, when the law enforcement was not producing results, Mr. G, he was after results, and I believe he firmly was after results, and he was staying very visible, putting pressure on law enforcement to make an arrest, and he even went as far as to hire his own investigators. Well, in doing that, he set up tip lines. He received a lot of tips from people about possible leads in the case. And through his investigators, they vetted those tips. And he went over a few of those things in his interview yesterday. But one of the things that he said was very, very interesting to my ears. And I think it's going to be very interesting to the defense's ears as well. Thank you for doing that interview, Mr. G. And what we're going to do right now, though, is we're going to look, like I have, into the Idaho law as it relates to third-party investigations and discovery. And then I'm going to show you why it's so important based on something he said in that interview. Hold on to your hats, folks. This one's going to be an interesting ride. First of all, in Idaho, discovery of evidence from a third-party investigation is governed by the Idaho Rules of Civil Procedure and the Idaho Criminal Rules, with a focus on transparency and fairness. Parties have a continuing duty to disclose any additional evidence or witnesses they discover before or during trial. And this also applies to information obtained from third-party investigations. Idaho also recognizes a tort for third-party spoliation, meaning a third party can be held liable for intentionally destroying evidence that is relevant to a potential lawsuit. Third-party spoliation? Idaho has adopted the tort of international interference with a prospective civil action by spoliation of evidence by a third party, meaning a third party can be sued for destroying or altering evidence relevant to a potential civil case. And that would apply even more so to a criminal case. So more than a can be sued, it can be actually arrested. Now, how do you obtain this information once you realize it exists? Well, you do it through a motion to compel. If a party believes they are not receiving all relevant information, including from third-party investigations, they can file a motion to compel discovery, which the court can order. In essence, Idaho law seeks to ensure fairness in discovery by requiring the disclosure of all relevant information, even if it comes from third-party sources. The law also provides remedies for those who are harmed by the destruction of evidence or withholding of information, as well as protection for privileged communications and confidential informants. I thought that last part was kind of interesting as well. So that information that was obtained through a third-party investigation better have been held on to, and the defense just needs to file a motion to compel along with the information that I'm providing in this video, and they will be able to obtain that information that I think could be very relevant to this case based on what Mr. G said. Let's have a listen.
If there was a certain thing in the room that was missing, things like that. Do we have pictures that they don't have access to that, Maddie Mae's room? Lays out like layouts of the room, if it changed, things like that. So yeah, we learned that they went for Maddie first, and then Kaylee woke up. Kaylee showed signs of fighting and, or a fight. I don't know really what somebody waking up with somebody stabbing you, how much fighting you can really do. Yeah, we learned that they went for Maddie first, and then Kaylee, that they went for,
Now that's a side point to what I'm about to disclose in this video, but I thought that was very interesting. And my ears perked up when I heard him say they went for. They went for. Not Brian went for, but they. So it tells you right there in a relaxed conversational interview that, Mr. G just, he's a little bit more forthcoming with information. He knows it was a multiple perp crime, as you can see. But let's move on to the really pertinent part that I want to discuss.
But then this monster struck her multiple times, and those were injuries that I was told that only she had in that room. I don't know about the other people downstairs, but that was one of those details where we kept to ourselves because people would come forward and say, "Oh, I know exactly what happened that night." And we be like, "So describe what happened to Kaylee," and they couldn't do it. So that was something that helped us, and I really appreciate Mabbit for sharing that information. And that was one of those details where we kept to ourselves because people would come forward and say, "Oh, I know exactly what happened that night." And we be like, "So describe what happened to Kaylee," and they couldn't do it. So because people would come forward and say, "Oh, I know exactly what happened that night," and because people would come forward and say,
You see, that right there can be something absolutely huge. Because as I've told you from the beginning, once I found out that Steve G hired his own investigators and I dove into those Steve G texts when they were exposed, he clearly states that one of the places that his investigation led him was to the Latah County Jail. And I've told you who was in the Latah County Jail at that time. And I told you that it's my firm belief that the people in the Latah County Jail that he was working with is what he called so-called jailhouse snitches that led him on an investigation for several weeks that didn't lead anywhere. Well, those would be the people that would tell him, I know exactly what happened, because he conducted a third-party investigation. And he is clearly admitting that he has had people come to him and tell him, I know exactly what happened. Who are those people that came to you, Mr. G? And since you conducted a third-party investigation into the Brian Cobberger case, it is your duty to disclose all of those people that came forward and told you, I know exactly what happened, because that is discovery that's exculpatory to the defense. So the defense, all they have to do now, based on that interview, is file a motion to compel for that discovery evidence, and Mr. G will need to produce that. So thank you for letting us know that you had that information, Mr. G. That could be critical to us getting to the truth of the matter of who actually committed the crime on King Road the night of November 13th, 2022. And don't think that Mr. G hasn't turned over evidence of his investigation to the prosecution. So it is all fair to turn over evidence of his investigation to the defense, as he further states.
Let me go back to something you mentioned about, I think you said someone reached out to you who had taken one of Brian Koberger's Reddit questionnaires. Is that true?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
We actually got a letter on that one, and then in the letter was a number to call. This individual said that they had been called, they got the Reddit. Somebody called to survey them on crimes, and he was like, I felt like I was getting set up by the cops. So I was just like, I answered it kind of like over the top. He's like, I kind of embellished some stuff, kind of pulling the cop's leg, hung up. This guy calls me back a couple days later, and we start talking again. And he goes, and I start feeling like this guy's like enjoying how I was describing how I was getting away with, like how I selected my victims. And he said, so I told him, I knew these neighborhoods that had a lot of money, and somebody might drink a little too much wine. Somebody might make a call to 911 over a noise complaint. Somebody goes to jail. And when that male went to jail, I'd go to that house, surveil it. And if it looked like there was somebody in that house that was passed out, I would go rob that house. And that's how he picked his victims, I would say. And he would rob them from jewelry, and I don't know what you do nowadays. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but maybe cash or something. But he would rob them. He said that Brian seemed to enjoy his story, called him a couple times. He said he was so odd about it that when this case came forward, he was like, I know exactly what this is about. I'm going to reach out, and, maybe he's pulling my leg. There's been plenty of people who have sent us stuff that weren't accurate, but it always stuck with me. It already stuck. There's certain things that stick with you. That one was one of them. And, there's other stuff that other letters that we've given back to the prosecution and said, we don't even know what to do with this. And they've taken it. So
That was my next question. You shared that with prosecutors. They were interested to hear from these people?
yeah, I don't know where it goes from there, but yeah, we've definitely given them the letters, and it's kind of like, it just seems like it's a dead end. You never hear again. I was hoping I'd get my letter back, but no, we never got anything back. And I've never seen anything like that in the list of evidence. So it probably turned out to be nothing. We actually got a letter on that one. And then in the letter was a number to call. There's been plenty of people who have sent us stuff that weren't accurate, but there's other stuff that other letters that we've given back to the prosecution and said, we don't even know what to do with this.
That was my next question. You shared that with prosecutors. They were interested to hear from these people?
Yeah, I don't know where it goes from there, but yeah, we've definitely given them the letters. And
So, absolutely admits that anything that he thought was incriminating to Brian Cobberger, they turned over to the prosecution. Did the prosecution turn that over to the defense? But even more important, the things that he didn't think was incriminating to Brian Cobberger, doesn't sound like he turned those over to the prosecution. And those are absolutely discoverable by the defense due to a third-party investigation into the case. So a motion to compel by the defense to Mr. G seems well in order to get real information that is exculpatory to the defense. Thank you for doing that interview, Mr. G. And as far as the alibi for Brian Cobberger that I've been alluding to here the last couple of weeks, as it relates to that picture of the night sky where the EXIF information would log longitude and latitude and time, and people out there questioning whether it exists or not. Well, I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind after listening to this that at the very least, Mr. G believes it exists. Check it out.
or for the person who turned their phone off, which again, who turns their phone off at 3 a.m. in a college town
To go stargazing.
To go start. And
Yeah.
like we said, where's your stargazing app? If you're out there, you got this app that identifies these stars that you're staring at. Don't play us like fools. Don't just expect us to think you're just walking around clicking at the sky.
Well, that's when the reasonable nature of a juror comes in, right? Like, what's reasonable to you? Is that reasonable? Does that really
Exactly.
sound like your gut feels good about that? And
Don't just expect us to think you're just walking around clicking at the sky. Don't just expect us to think you're just walking around clicking at the sky.
That tells me that Brian Cobberger has pictures of the night sky that night. They know he does, and they don't believe their lying eyes. But absolutely, the things that was exposed in this interview, the defense needs to jump all over it, file a motion to compel to get that discovery. And here's why it's important, y'all. And this is going to be for those of you that have been following me from day one, because for those people out there that didn't see my first 100 to 150 videos, this won't make as much sense to them. But when we hear the things that we hear in this interview, like clearly Mr. G believes that they did it, that there is more than one perpetrator. And we've heard from other sources that the reactions of Mrs. G tend to lend to her believing it was multiple perpetrators as well. Well, that goes back to the beginning of my investigation into this case, because for those of you that have followed me for a long time know that I followed the trail of the investigators in this case along with the facts. And what I determined was they were after Brian Cobberger and another assailant because they were the hitmen on the job. Now, through my investigation, I realized that Brian Cobberger was not the hitman. But make no mistake, whenever you hear them acknowledging that there was more than one assailant, this goes out of the realm of one-off perfect crime, all that kind of stuff. They believe, you need to understand this, they believe that Brian Cobberger and another assailant were the hitmen for the crime. They've always believed it. And when I say they, I mean law enforcement. That has always been their true belief. They have used mainstream morons to manipulate a story so they can go into trial thinking they have enough evidence to convict Bryan Cobberger without actually bringing their truth forward. But make no mistake, they've always believed it. Because once you have two assailants committing a crime in just a matter of minutes, according to them, then there can be no mistake. It was a hit. And it's always been for the reason that I've said it was. What they failed to investigate properly was the people that were truly involved in the crime. The people that truly told on other people their manipulated story. This was set up by those people from the beginning to implicate somebody. And I don't believe it was set up to implicate Bryan Cobberger. I believe he was collateral damage in their setup, as those of you who have followed me know that I believe. And I believe I have much evidence to back that up. But make no mistake, what is truly believed and what you're seeing is two different things by almost everybody involved in this case. However, in lieu of the judge not granting the motion to relieve the death penalty so that they can seat a proper jury, other steps now need to be taken by the defense. And what I've brought to them in this video is the obvious steps that they need to take to ensure that the proper jury is seated in this case. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms, and until next time, Pavarotti's out.